All right, welcome to the broadcast of Unleash Independence. We have here Cameron, one of the founders. Cameron, welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
And we also have Joshua Byers, who is a great contributor to the website, and he makes videos for the Pittsburgh Libertarian, I guess is what he calls his videos. So, Joshua, thank you.
Hi.
Alrighty, so today's topic is the controversial Glenn Beck, and also a little bit about cognitive dissonance. Glenn Beck, over the years, has really changed his views. Some people would say he's lying. Some people would say he's really changed. We don't really know. Nobody knows really but him. So, but we're going to kind of discuss a little about what we think in his little pathway. Because, I mean, I've seen videos years ago talking about we need this healthcare thing to change. We need these bailouts to happen. And then he's come back and said sorry. And I've hated him for years. And so I was just
Don't mince words, Brock. Don't mince words.
I mean, but at the same time,
What
like,
you really think?
I mean, I hated the guy for years until I put it into the perspective of some of my friends who were some of the hardest big government neocons, and that I started to realize, wait, like, this was a year ago they used to be like this, and now they're like, we agree. So I guess we're going to relate to Cameron's article, because this is kind of what started this. Cameron wrote an article called "I Am Trying to Learn," quoting Glenn Beck. And so, Cameron, give us a little brief understanding of that.
Well, if you haven't seen the video of the Glenn Beck radio program, what he basically is saying is that I mean, let me just boil it down. He's sorry, is what he says. He says he was wrong on the wars, he was wrong on foreign policy, whatever. So basically, when I looked at this, it made me think a little bit. Now, you can read some of my articles. I don't say that I would hate Glenn Beck, but I hate Glenn Beck. He's not I don't agree with him on anything, and haven't agreed with him on nearly anything. I think that he is the king of disinformation. Almost everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie. He's pathological that way. Okay, so let me be clear on my opinion of Glenn Beck. But when an individual comes and says, "I was wrong. I want to change. I want to learn," maybe it's my nature. I hope it's the nature of other people to say, "You have the floor. Let's work this out." And you know what? I think, if someone turns on and listens to Glenn Beck to see, is he being genuine? And all of a sudden he comes out and says, psych, I support big government, like, you're fools, I mean, what's the worst thing that happens? You just turn your radio off and you just put it by the wayside as the old Glenn Beck. But if he really is serious about learning, if he really is talking to libertarians off air, trying to understand things more, I mean, he said on air in front of his audience, which is quite large, that the foreign policy, and this I'm talking about, this is on February 22nd, so I mean, this is new. I'm not talking about 5 years ago Glenn Beck. I'm talking about this week Glenn Beck, all right? The war on drugs is flawed. We need to end it. We shouldn't have military bases all over. Our foreign policy doesn't work. He says he was a fool for supporting the Patriot Act. If he's getting up and saying that, I'm more than willing to hear him out. And honestly, it's the audience that he listens to him that I'm more interested in. How many people are now questioning the Patriot Act? How many people are now questioning the war on drugs because he made that statement? And that's really what I care about.
So, Josh, I guess, what was your take when you read Cameron's article, or what's your take just on Glenn Beck in general?
So, for me, my view kind of evolved on this over the last few days. For instance, when I first heard that Glenn was, I guess, had an epiphany, I was like, oh, same old Beck, same old story. He's just blowing smoke to get his audience ratings up, because he just shifts with his audience like he has for the last 7 years. And so I didn't give it much thought and just kind of commented accordingly on Facebook. But then my friend Mike insisted that I watch this clip from him, and I kind of backed off a little bit from my position. I still think he, is not totally genuine, but he does maybe have a little bit of, okay, maybe I need to rethink things. I suspect, though, that ultimately he's going to be embraced by what I call liberty Republicans rather than libertarians, because his current neocon or his old neocon thinking is closer to them than it is to libertarianism. And I think that the Rand Paul type Republican libertarians he's going to end up embracing them. And then of course because their political philosophy is internally inconsistent, so it's going to kind of be brought more towards the neocons as time rolls on. So, I mean, in one hand, you might say to yourself, oh, well, this is a good thing because, as Cameron said, oh, they're talking about the drug war being wrong, they're talking about foreign policy being wrong, but over the long term, it seems to me that it's just going to be the same old story. Because Glenn, if you watch that little segment that Cameron was talking about from 22nd, he's calling libertarians fascists still. He's calling Nazis. He said that he's not hiring any real libertarians. He says that he is, but then he says he's not hiring any anarchists, so that rules out Tom Woods types of people, rules out Lou Rockwell type people, rules out Ron Paul type people. So he doesn't really have any libertarians on his staff, contrary to what he says. And he then proceeds to belittle and hound libertarians for supposedly excluding him from the club, which is just nonsense. I mean, what club? Are we excluding him from anything? He's the one with the 20 million people audience or whatever it is.
That's interesting.
But so it's from my point of view, it's just the same old Beck. Most likely, if he's willing to listen and change, great. But I suspect he's probably got the ear of. He's probably listening to the wrong people. Would be my guess.
Well, I would say this.
You know what? Go ahead, Brock.
What I was going to say is with Glenn Beck, whether he's lying or whether he is telling the truth about changing, all I can say is it's a success, because the fact that we have grown this movement far enough to it is now influencing Glenn Beck, whether lying or truthful. We need to be proud that, hey, look what this is doing. We are actually affecting some of the biggest Republican pundits to actually start talking about these issues. Whether or not Glenn Beck switches and says, I mean, I think we already know what Glenn Beck's going to do. Let's just say Rand Paul is the guy we want, which honestly, I don't care about politicians anymore, but just the majority of people want Rand Paul. If that happens, he even said in the video I was just watching that he said, well, we want Rand Paul, but if we get stuck with Chris Christie, I'll end up supporting him anyways. So
well, he says, let me be fair, okay? And this is odd for me to defend Beck. But he says if there was another Barack Obama, okay, if the Republican Party keeps giving us choices like Mitt Romney or Barack Obama, well, he thinks that Mitt Romney would be less effective in destroying America than Barack Obama would be. So that's where he would support. But he does want someone like Rand. He endorses Rand in the video. So anyways, back to you. That was my...
Okay, no, that's a good point. I missed that. So yeah, I mean, but I actually don't see them going. I see them going more big government even after Obama. So I don't see that changing. So I see them pulling the fear tactic of that also. So Josh.
So here's one thing that I think that the Rand Paul people need to be, well, not just the Rand Paul people, but people listening to him in general need to be aware of and remember his history. It seems like Glenn's history just goes down the memory hole. I mean, he betrayed Ron back in 2008 during the election. He called Ron Paul supporters terrorists on his radio program. He betrayed Deborah Medina right before the election. He was real nice and friendly with her up until the election and betrayed her in 2010, I think it was, against Governor Rick Perry. And then, of course, he threw Ron under the bus again in 2012. And so it's like, okay, this is his history. He always ends up siding with the establishment in the end. So why would he not do that to Rand Paul? It seems to me that he probably would, because he'll have like a little Republican neocon whispering into his ear, "Oh, we have to support the Republican neocon because of X." And Glenn will be like, "Oh yeah, you're right," and then he'll tell his audience to do that, and his audience will do whatever he tells them to. So I mean, I think that's a very realistic possibility to happen again.
I think you're right. Joshua, I agree with you on that. I think that's probably more than likely what will happen. And you know what? For anyone that's upset because I'm saying listen to Glenn Beck right now, just to hear what he has to say. I'm not saying when I say listen to Glenn Beck, I mean in a literal sense, just listen with your ears. I'm not saying act upon what he's saying. Okay, but you know, I don't know. For those people that are supporting Rand right now, that is a very real possibility. You've brought up, several great points, and he does need to address these things if he wants to be, if he actually wants, if he says accept me into your club or whatever he's saying, whatever that means. He does need to address these things because the people that he wants to work with now are the same people that he said are terrorists. That's a big deal.
Right. That, and the fact of the matter is that he just has no credibility at all. I mean, no. I don't know how you can work with a guy that has on multiple occasions stabbed the people we work with in the back. And, I mean, to me, it's just absurd to trust this guy. Maybe he had some kind of epiphany, and maybe he's seeking redemption. But usually when like a politician screws up, they kind of resign office, right? If they're really serious about sorry and regretful, they leave office. But I mean, has Glenn given up his microphone because he's been wrong for the last 7 years? No. Why should we listen to guys that have been wrong day in and day out for years instead of someone like Tom Woods?
Well, the thing is
right. Well, absolutely. And you know what I think is the difference is, I think a lot of people are thinking, well, if we are willing to lend an ear to Glenn Beck or to hear him out, that all of a sudden that makes him the spokesperson for libertarians worldwide. That doesn't mean anything. His credibility is shot. And you know what? I hope he comes our way. It seems that he has been over a few years. But if he does come our way, then he's got to realize that, yeah, he's pretty low on the totem pole of credible sources, and he really needs to change what he's doing.
Well, the thing of it is he's low on the totem pole of credibility with guys like us. But with folks like, I have a friend back home running a Christian radio station, and she absolutely loves Glenn Beck. He's the best thing since sliced bread, and she's listened to him for years. And she actually recently contacted me and told me, hey, look, I'm going to go to my first Libertarian Party meeting as a result of what Glenn Beck was talking about, because she's looking for answers too, because obviously what they've been doing hasn't been working. And so, I mean, that's, I guess, a good thing, but at the same time, like if Beck gets wrapped around the Liberty Republicans, it's just the 80s all over again, a Reagan revolution, and we all know how that ended up. It ended up with bigger government than we had before Reagan came into office. And it ended up marginalizing the Murray Rothbard type libertarians that actually had the real answers. And so I kind of see history repeating itself here again with, Glenn getting, kind of absorbed by the Liberty Republicans, and the Liberty Republicans are completely principleless. And of course, they just keep marching ever further down the status line. It seems like every week there's some kind of new, ridiculous agenda item from the Rand Paul camp. I mean, just today I was reading about he's supporting school vouchers now, or school choice. Like a page out of Milton Friedman's book. And of course, we all know that as long as the government still has control over the funding, that it's going to control the curriculum. And so, it's just making government more efficient. The same, bad ideas that Milton Friedman put forth for years, and it made the problem worse. Like when Milton Friedman improved the welfare system by making it automatic instead of making people have to go sign up, more people
right.
ended up on the dole as a result, because then the social stigma kind of got, put aside, and people didn't feel ashamed anymore for going to the offices and signing up. And so, making government more efficient is the last thing we need to be doing, because it seems that Rand and his team haven't seemed to learn that lesson. And so it seems like history is repeating itself all over again.
See,
I see a point. Oh, go ahead, Brock. Go ahead.
I just want to say one little thing that I think a lot of anybody in this liberty movement, whether, I don't care what label you want to call yourself, but even Republicans, you know what, everybody, like, we're always looking for, like, this one person who's going to explain things properly. And I think we need to stop with that and just go, let's get as many people as we can to just talk about the issues. If they're not and stop trying to worry about getting special people into office and things like that. I love that Glenn Beck is talking about these issues because I like what Cameron said. I'm worried more about his audience because if these people start getting a hold of this, they're going and just all these ideas are going to their head. Once they get aligned with these principles, I don't think they're going to go back to do what Glenn Beck says. I think, and the reason I can say that is because I have a lot of friends who are neocons, and once they became Liberty, none of them have gone back. And so, even if Glenn Beck's lying, he's actually helping. And I think same goes for Rand Paul. I don't like Rand Paul fully. I don't agree. Everything Josh said, I agree with what Josh was saying. That Rand Paul doesn't fully get it, but I love that he's bringing to issues like TSA and things like that. So I think let's just find more people to talk about these issues, and the more and more people that talk about them, the more people we're going to keep collecting. And once they understand liberty, there's no going back.
You know, Brock, you bring up some good points, and I think that's very true. You know, maybe there is an effort to kind of co-opt, as the Tea Party was, you know, co-opted. A lot of neocons went in there, and that thing was ruined. But the thing is with libertarians, I don't know how you do co-opt them because those are principled people. They're not going to change, you know. And so yeah, I do think, Joshua, you're right. We probably will have a flood of these. You know, kind of maybe, you know, Reagan-esque, Republican, or Liberty Republicans, and maybe Rand will be the next Reagan. Who knows? I'm not sure. But
it's a possibility. I mean, I see so many parallels between what was going on in the late 70s and the 80s and the Rand Paul revolution. That it's, to me,
right.
It's kind of like, oh my goodness, this is history repeating itself all over again. I mean, there's some differences because, you know, Rand is Ron's son, and so there's always that, oh look, here's the standard, or at least a pretty good standard that Ron put forth, and we can kind of judge Rand by that, where we didn't have that in the Reagan Revolution. So that's more hopeful than them.
Yeah, well, and to Brock's point too, you know, there are those people that will go to the libertarian meetings and they'll say, "These guys are crazy. This is not what Glenn Beck was talking about. I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to go back." But then there are those that will, you know, it will eventually end up growing the movement, and I think that's a very good thing. You know, I hadn't heard that about Rand Paul and the education. I just want to comment on that real quick because Ron, everything that I've heard from him since he left Congress has been about education. And so for Rand to take a stance like that, I think is completely outrageous.
Well, I mean,
it's weird.
It doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, like I said, it seems every week there's some kind of new. He grows ever closer to statism on every issue down the line, from foreign policy to healthcare to even the TSA, where he supports. It's not like full privatization. He supports some kind of compromise position that Robert Wenzel was talking about. I don't remember. Any of you guys remember what Robert Wenzel was talking about in relation to the TSA and Rand? It was okay. Well, it's not full privatization of the security. He doesn't just want to eliminate the TSA, which is problematic. So it just, but I guess the ultimate problem is that when you don't eliminate the government, you still have state intervention into the economy that'll have unintended consequences, and then the other side will go, like the Democrats and the progressives will go, after the policies fail, because state intervention always fails, even if it's statism light that Rand Paul's presenting. What will happen after the failure, the progressives will go, hey, look, we tried liberty, we tried libertarianism, it failed, so it's time for statism again. And so we set ourselves up for long-term defeat with these half-assed, compromised, lukewarm policies. And it happened before. It happened in the early '90s with the revolution. I think it was in '94 after Clinton was elected in '92. There was a Republican Revolution in '94, and they sold out. And it happened in the early '80s with the Reagan Revolution. They sold out. And it's happening again with the Ron Paul or the Rand Paul revolution.
I agree.
All right, so here's an idea. I want to just springboard this real quick. I think this will get us to the new topic. Unless Brock, you have a comment on what Joshua was just barely saying.
Yeah, real quick. I was going to say, with Rand Paul, like just kind of putting myself in his shoes, seeing my dad be in Congress for 30 years, and he didn't really get much done in terms of policy, but he did wake up people in the last 10 years, drastically. But I can see where he's trying to do. He's just like, well, let's just do these small steps each time. But so I understand like what he's trying to do, but I agree with Josh where it's just it backfires, and it's like saying, well, let's kind of do a privatization. That's like the Fed. It's like it's kind of private, it's kind of government. It's like it ends up making things sometimes worse, where it's like it's just crazy. So like I mean, no matter what we're doing here, like I believe in like we can take baby steps with certain areas, but if you don't understand like markets or competition, like then you're not going to ever solve the problem. And I think that's where Rand is not fully getting it. But
I would disagree with you on one of your points, Brock. I don't think that maybe that's what Rand is doing. Is thinking, let's take some little steps here, little steps there. Let's fight the TSA. Let's fight the drones. Things that most people can unite. Unite against. But I don't think that that's his strategy on a principled way. Saying I fully endorse these principles of self-ownership when he does support what we've been doing with our foreign policy. To hear him talk about foreign policy it's heartbreaking. I would think of all things. That would be something that he would not ever endorse, and that's the biggest issue I have with Rand. Well, if he could change the foreign policy, I would be able to get on board with what you're saying, Brock. But with his current foreign policy, I can't endorse that. I don't think that's what he's doing.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying with Rand, I think he's willing to sacrifice principles like that one. Like, and again, nobody knows really. We don't know if he's just looking to get attention, like all politicians. They just like the attention, so they're willing to lie to get more attention. Or if he thinks he can just lie to the establishment and think eventually he can sway them. Whatever it is, I don't agree with it. No one can determine that. And I'm so tired of everyone just endorsing candidates to begin with. Like, stop endorsing. Right. Let's talk about ideas, and then people will vote the way they want to vote, and just leave it at that. But that's just my take.
All right. So to your comment, Joshua, about they want to try libertarianism through Rand Paul possibly, and then it'll fail or whatever. We've tried that. Let's go back to statism. Why don't we just do that? You're gonna be experiencing some cognitive dissonance right now. I'm gonna challenge your models. I'm gonna challenge this paradigm. We should just wreck the system. Let's just go complete status. I think that's the solution. If government is there to take care of us, then we can actually have progression because I don't have to work. I can work on myself. I can focus on myself. Joshua, do you endorse that idea if we're talking about ideas?
So, as a libertarian, I won't endorse any further encroachments of the state. But at the same time, halfway measures have just shown themselves historically to be self-defeating in the long term. They get a short-term success and it ends up in long-term defeat. And so, we got to be careful about the type of compromises we take. I mean, sometimes there are those that say, "Oh, you guys are just purists. You don't ever want to, work with reality." And that's not really the case. What the case is that we have to be careful about the types of compromises we make so that we don't undercut the long-term goals. And what I mean by that is we should never make a compromise that destroys the principle of self-ownership.
I want to jump in and just give you a quick quote. This is what Rand Paul said. His quote on compromise is compromise on the means, not the principle. Okay, so how we get it done, but not what we're getting done. So anyways, back to your point.
Well,
Rand Paul.
so I mean, if he really believed that, then I'd say, that's great. But I mean, his actions he doesn't seem to believe that. But no, the strategy I think that we should take, and the strategy that it looked like Ron Paul took during his congressional career, was that from Murray Rothbard in Chapter 15, Strategy for Liberty from his book For New Liberty, where Rothbard talks about the only type of compromises we make are how much we're going to reduce government by. It's not whether we're going to increase government in one area so that we can get a bigger decrease in another area. You never make that type of compromise because it sacrifices the principle when you do that. And you always kind of hold the principle up high when you're making the compromise. Like, look, the example Rothbard gave was on slavery. And he goes, look, we should immediately abolish slavery because that's the right thing to do, but we will accept, kind of a halfway measure on the full way to get there. And, that's the type of compromises that you make, not this, we'll allow statism to increase over here if we get a bigger decrease over here. And you could see that kind of thinking when Rand Paul did the NDAA vote, where he voted for the NDAA 2013 in order to get the indefinite detention provision added to it. Right? So he got the indefinite detention provision, but as Justin Amash pointed out, it didn't actually curtail indefinite detention. And then he lost even his empty rhetoric during the conference committee. And so he sold out. He sold his vote for a $632 billion bill, didn't even get what he was promised in rhetoric, and they got his vote. And so it just shows that that type of halfway measure just doesn't work. It would have been far better if there had been one senator standing alone against that bill, but instead everybody voted for it, nobody opposed it, and Rand didn't get anything. And so I think that Rothbard's strategy is the way to go, not this kind of nonsense that we see right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about this, so let's kind of switch gears. I don't think we ever intended to really go down and talk about Rand Paul, but that's very great information, Joshua. I appreciate it. We should do this, though. Let's talk about Rand another time in great detail. But relating back to the Glenn Beck thing, people have been saying, well, 5 years ago he's been saying this, 2 years ago he's been saying this, last week he said this. I understand that. The problem that I want to address is cognitive dissonance. And what this relates to is when, let me give you an example. And if you haven't read my article, I try to go into it a little bit. You can read that at unleashindependence.com. But what it is we judge information instantly by comparing it to models. For example, the example used in the article is, if I tell you that a refrigerator is a great way to heat up vegetables, you know that I'm lying to you. You know that information is true because refrigeration or refrigerators are used to cool items down. So that's the model that we have for that. But for example, if we talk about Abraham Lincoln, can you hear me okay? Am I cutting out?
A little bit, cutting out just a little bit, but it's good enough.
Anything that was important that was missed?
No. We'll stop you if it does happen, just the connection. So go ahead.
Okay, please let me know. But have we ever talked about Abraham Lincoln or Christopher Columbus? Some of these things where almost unanimously people accept that Abraham Lincoln was a great guy and Christopher Columbus is a great guy. But if you said Christopher Columbus was whoring out children, little girls, and that Abraham Lincoln was, revoked habeas corpus and was killing writers in the North, things like that, all of a sudden people start getting angry with you. Like, this challenges everything that they've known and been taught. That reaction is uncomfortable for them. What they have thought is being challenged, and it feels uncomfortable. It's cognitive dissonance. And so basically what we is how to deal talking with people, I don't expect to have a conversation with someone and all of a sudden after the end of the conversation they hate Christopher Columbus or Abraham Lincoln, but hopefully with how we approach things they will go and research it and go, oh my gosh, this is interesting. Now what do we have? What's the product of that, guys? We have a self-thinking person that is willing to challenge the models and understands everything isn't as they thought it once was. And that's what we should be striving for. So when we talk about cognitive dissonance, it's about bringing to light truth and understanding that it's not easy for people to admit that they've been wrong for decades,
So
yeah.
I think the biggest thing is when you tell someone that they know something wrong, you're not insulting the facts. Not, I mean, you are saying the facts are wrong about something, but they're not going to take it that way. They're taking it as you're insulting who they are because it's something that they believe. It doesn't matter if it's religion, politics, whatever it is. If it's something that they're passionate about, emotion, and you tell them that there's something wrong, it's beliefs. So you're insulting who they are. So the goal is to find ways to not do that. We're always going to offend people, but it really comes down to finding the proper way to explain it so they can take things as a neutral standpoint. You don't even want them to just accept it, just a neutral standpoint so they can just analyze it themselves. But some people are just so stuck in their ways, whether good or bad. I mean, they just get stuck in their ways.
Joshua?
Cognitive dissonance is definitely a common American problem. Just thinking in general seems to be beyond the average American. I mean, no matter what the topic is, if you stray from the official American religion, then you're some kind of terrible heretic, and you need, metaphorically burned at the stake.
Right.
You can call it.
It's interesting, and there's so many examples. Brock, we had a discussion. You were even informing me with some things I didn't know about the Pledge of Allegiance. You want to get someone fired up. Go ahead, Brock, and say what you said about the Pledge of Allegiance, and we will lose viewers, and we will have people be running after us with pitchforks. But the thing is it's true, and so a person should be more interested in the truth rather than saving face, and a lot of the times that's what we're dealing with.
No, it's true.
Brock, Pledge of Allegiance, I want to hear it.
The biggest thing, I mean, it's the United States of amnesia. I mean, that's really what we have here, is nobody wants to really look at our country with facts. We only want to look at with, we can do no harm. I gotta have that in front of me. I'd have to look that up real quick. But
America's exceptional, Brock. I don't know what you're talking about. Why do you hate America?
Yeah, you terrorist. Really, I mean, the Pledge of Allegiance, the guy who wrote it, he openly said that the words he used in that, indivisible, and I know a lot of people attack me and go, well, it's not what I was told when I was a kid, but the indivisible in his mind was he never wanted people to separate and leave the Union. He even stated that in his quote. I'll have to go back and find that. And then he also talked about, there's a few other things. There's a lot of things that he was talking about in there that for which it stands, so for which the government stands, and it should never change. And it should never change. And he talked about how he loved Abraham Lincoln's ideas of never letting the Union separate. And I think that is, and for which it stands. So, like, that's the part that I don't like, is for however it stands, never let it separate. So if we stick by that principle in terms of the now, that means however the government is, never let it stand. And if we abided by that, our country would have never been founded. So now, was that the Cameron that you were talking about, or was there something else?
No, that's the gist of it. But yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate when you look at something like the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm loving this right now because I'm excited just thinking about all the responses we're gonna get. But the Pledge of Allegiance itself, I pledge allegiance to the flag. It's interesting that we are willing to do, just say things and act this way without actually processing what are we doing. We're giving our allegiance to a symbol, and what does it represent? It represents, like you stated, however the government is, whatever they want to do, will not divide, will stay united. And Abraham Lincoln, really, you go and look it up. That's what he was trying to do when the South was trying to secede. He couldn't have it happen. He went to war. Over 500,000 people were killed over it. When you look at the course of the world, there's a lot of information, even just within America, that there's information with the founders. They wanted to get rid of slavery later on, and the British threatened another war with them, and so they didn't go and do it. I mean, look it up, guys. This is information that is out there. And I mean, not just information that's out there, but it's on the internet, must be true. But no, this is history. is what I'm saying. But yeah, anyways, I know a little
One
off
thing
point, but
what you just brought up, it's something I forgot, was pledging our allegiance. And I don't like the idea of pledging our allegiance to anything. Like, I mean, or if we pledge our allegiance to something, I don't care whether it's a flag, I don't care who it is or what it is, or even an idea. Like, we can say, I pledge my allegiance to liberty. Well, that liberty word can be redefined. I mean, look at the words that we use now, like freedom. You can say freedom to somebody else, and then they manipulate what that word means. So, like,
right.
I think freedom means that I have the freedom to get
Well,
education.
Josh,
The communists turned many words upside down. Freedom was one of them. They would be, when they said freedom, they meant like the victory of the proletariat over the bourgeoisie. And so what they basically meant was, state rule. So they completely turned it upside down. Famous for doing that.
look, let's talk about this because that's very important. Because when we look at the status or major influences in the world, they also have to fight against cognitive dissonance. But what do? It's easier to change a word or definition of a word than it is to change the mind of an individual. And so what we see a lot of times is our words, the definitions are changed, like you're talking about, Joshua and Brock. Even terrorists, look at what the word terrorist has become. It's outrageous. It could be anyone that supports the Constitution by some standards. There are organizations that claim that. And not to go on a conspiracy or what people are talking about, but this is also information. We need to look at how words are being defined. Even healthcare, healthcare and wellness, that's different than medical care. But we don't say, well, here's the medical care plan. We're talking about healthcare. Healthcare and wellness should be talking about what we do with our body, how we exercise, what we work, what we eat, things like that. But is that the rhetoric that's used? No, we don't use medical care. When we're talking about finances and going to a medical facility like a hospital, we talk about healthcare because that allows the government to kind of get involved with our health, what we should be eating. Look at everything Michelle Obama is doing, rather than just talking about the financing of the medical system, which is really what Obamacare is about. So, anyways.
Well, Cameron, we like Rothbard always said, we live in the land of euphemism. Nothing means what it used to mean. What Garrett, he wrote a great essay, I think it's in the 30s or 40s, and this was just after kind of FDR's New Deal, and he wrote, the revolution was, and he talked about how the old words and forms were still used, but the meanings behind the words had changed. And it's a great essay. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And he wrote this in the 30s. And he pointed out that everybody's concerned about losing our freedoms, and big government's gonna come eat us if we don't do something. And Garrett was like, you missed it. It's already happened. I mean, we already have big government. You weren't paying attention. He wrote this in the 30s, and you would swear it was written for today. But great essay.
Wow, Joshua, I want to do kind of an experiment. I want to just kind of say a word, and I want you to tell me what the first thing that comes to your mind is.
Oh boy.
Revolution.
Revolution. I guess for me, I think of the American Revolution.
Okay, so describe it. What do you picture?
George Washington and crew fighting off the British.
Okay. Now look at the actual root of or not root, but look at what the word means. A revolution means to change, right? When we're talking about, for instance, how many revolutions per minute, RPM, right? We're talking about rotations. It's a change, but I think that a lot of people, again, with changing, there's bloody revolutions and all this stuff. I think that that's kind of the visuals that we get. about war and things like that. So I don't think revolution, even that word has been changed. I don't think revolution means it needs to be bloody, though Thomas Jefferson would say it does.
Yeah, it certainly means a lot of different things. I mean, Apple is famous for using that word for, when the Macintosh came out, and several of their product releases. And you could say that those were revolutions. I mean, in the '84, everything was a DOS-based text-like system, and then they had the GUI come out, and that with the mouse and graphics, and that changed everything. And so that was a revolution, and that's a peaceful one, and quite wonderful, actually. So, I guess the word can just mean multiple things, which is fine. But if someone's deliberately trying to advance a political agenda by changing the meaning of words, that's entirely different.
Exactly. All right. Well, Brock, you want to weigh in on anything?
Well, I think revolution can have all those different things, all those different meanings. It can be Obama can say this is a revolution for him too. So I mean, it's kind of anybody who wants big government, it's their revolution. And Ron Paul has talked about revolutions too, saying the majority of revolutions have ended up with bigger government. When these people rise up,
French.
exactly. As soon as we rise up, they rise up and they think they're going to get what they want, and then they end up with more of the same. And
Careful what you wish for.
it's kind of dangerous. It's if we don't define things clearly about what we want, and what the principle is that we're holding to, it can go in completely different ways. I mean, you can have a personal revolution, and it's just a breakthrough. I mean, there's so many different things you can take, and I really just think it comes back to don't uphold any particular person, and I'm including Ron Paul, I'm including the Founding Fathers, Glenn Beck, Rand Paul, I mean, Lou Rockwell, Tom Woods. I think we should not be promoting these certain guys saying, these guys are amazing. We should be like, look at this. Let's talk about issues as a group or one-to-one and figure out what are their concerns and say, okay, what's the best article that I've read on that? And then sometimes it's Tom Woods, sometimes it's Lou Rockwell. But I just think when people turn on the radio and they listen to Glenn Beck every morning, it's just like the same people over and over. That person, whether good or bad, is co-opting your mind, and you are taking Glenn Beck's mind. You are taking Lou Rockwell's mind, and I think it's good to find other outlets so you don't get stuck into one particular mindset.
Okay, can I address this real quick because I don't think that my point was fully made. I know revolution has many meanings. All right, I want to revisit this real quick though. If you look at Google's if you Google revolution definition, okay, it says a forcible overthrow of government or social order for a new system. A class struggle. I mean, it's talking about really forcible things. I mean, that's what it says. But if you actually look at the definition of, and say Webster, okay, it says a fundamental way of thinking, okay, or it also means let's see, what does it say? The progress of motion of a body around an axis, okay, upon a line of a body parallel to an axis. So it means a change. But then if you look at it, someone would Google revolution on Google, and all of a sudden it says a forcible overthrow of the government. How demonizing is that? And that's my point, is that we're talking about a change, a paradigm shift, things like that. But when you're trying to, like the Ron Paul revolution, they don't want a paradigm shift. So what do? They say it's a negative thing. They want to overthrow the government, and it's anarchy. It's murder. That's my point. So, anyways, that's my point.
I think
on cognitive dissonance. Go ahead.
I was just say. I mean, I'm sure Joshua deals with this all the time. Is when you say anything related to anarchy, people think. They picture the guys with the masks on, and then they're throwing the cocktails and blowing things up, and it's just like, what? Like, it's just, I mean, that's called violence. That's not called.
The word anarchy's been so poisoned in public discourse. I don't even like to use it because people misunderstand what you mean. And anarchy, as it's supposed to be meant, or at least how libertarians mean it, it doesn't mean the absence of the rule of law. It means almost like the perfection of the rule of law, where no one's allowed to use coercive violence against anyone else. which is the precise opposite of what people think when you use that word. And so, you know, I don't use that word. I like the word voluntarist. I like the word libertarian. And, you know, we can. The reality is that people are going to, you know, actors are going to try to twist meanings of words, and they're going to use their media outlets to do it, and they have a lot of success doing it. And so we have to, you know, adapt as we go along to spread the message of liberty. And if, you know, if a word becomes poisoned, let's say voluntarist becomes poisoned in the future, you know, we have to stop using that word, like we had to stop using the word anarchist, because, you know, we don't want to convey the wrong message to people. You know, that's, I guess, all the point I had on that one.
Okay, but wait a second, Joshua. So what you're saying is, this whole time I've been supporting a cause, thinking that the world would be more like the show Sons of Anarchy, and you're talking about something completely different. Because I'm way off base. I think I'm out of here, man. This is not what I wanted. I wanted like Molotov cocktails and motorcycles and chains and shit.
Yeah, well, I mean, if that's what you want, I think what was there, a Beatles song, I think, that talked about revolution, and how, you know, if you wanted a violent revolution, count me out. I don't want anything to do with it. And that's kind of my point of view. I'm with the Beatles. Like, if you want violence, forget it. I don't want anything to do with it. Like the type of revolution we're talking about is revolution in ideas. You know, a revolution towards non-violence. And, you know, if the word anarchy has been poisoned, you know, we'll just, you know, okay, we won't use that word anymore. We'll try to convey to people what we really mean. And that means, you know, upholding the rule of law, the actual rule of law. Like, you know, no aggressing against your fellow man. I mean, why is this so hard? I mean, why are we so radical and out there for suggesting, oh my goodness, you shouldn't, the state shouldn't be allowed to do anything that we're not allowed to do. Oh my goodness, we're a bunch of radicals, radical troublemakers, suggesting that you shouldn't hurt anybody. Oh my goodness.
See, there's the other word, radical. It's like, what does that mean? Radical. I'm radically for health. I'm radically for cocaine. Like, what? It's just.
I don't know. I mean, traditionally, I mean, Americans kind of use that word. Kind of like the way we use the word libertarian today. Is like, yeah, I'm a radical, you know, and they were proud of it. And now it's been poisoned. And so, you know, now people think radical, you think some kind of violent extremist. And, you know, no, I mean, radical used to mean someone who's passionate. And, you know, why should we not want passionate people promoting the message of liberty?
You know, that's interesting, because
the microphone that is.
Every time someone says radical, I always think of that little clip in Finding Nemo, where they're surfing on the pike, you know, like the water current, and he's like, radical, you know? That's what I think of every time. So I'm like, why is that bad?
Yeah,
What's wrong with that?
In the right context, I think you can still use the word, but I think it's definitely been dirtied.
No, I agree. I'm joking around.
I think
so are you saying that cognitive dissonance is most easily fought when we're talking about we need to define our words and have our facts?
Well, it certainly helps a lot. Of course, you know, when your livelihood is dependent on believing a lie, and your mind kind of realizes it is a lie, that kind of creates, you know, antagonism within a person between choosing their livelihood versus, you know, choosing their personal well-being versus, you know, pursuing truth. And that's the situation a lot of people find themselves in, where especially in corporate America and in politics, where, you know, they want to do the right thing, they want to pursue the truth, but doing so means they lose their job, and then they're out in the street, and they know that intuitively, and so, you know, they go along with the lie even though it bothers them.
So true. I think what Joshua brought up one of the best points that we've been talking about is using the correct words or finding different words. And if anyone's ever studied this, it's called NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming. It's just a fancy way of saying how words or any way of communication affects our nervous system. And if we're saying things like anarchy, if that's making someone trigger a certain emotion before they think, then it's not working. So we have to find certain ways and use, I know a lot of writers, they call it creative language, and what they do is it's trying to like break their mental pattern. So they almost like, it's like we're constantly in a if we say certain words, it triggers us into a certain hypnosis, where we're already programmed to say a certain thing. But if we use certain words that they're not familiar with yet, then they go, huh, well, what's that? instead of going, what are you talking about? You're a terrorist. You're an extremist. So it's just, I love that point that Josh made about that we need to make sure we use proper words rather than just sticking to the old words that aren't working anymore.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Brock. I really think that's good input. I want to plug a book right now for anyone that is curious about cognitive dissonance. It's an Uncle Eric book, and I really like the series that they have, but it's called, so it's Uncle Eric Talks About Personal, Career, and Financial Security by Richard J. Mayberry. We'll have it on the site, at least a link to go and look at it and purchase it. But anyways, just wanted to plug that because that's a great book for people.
For sure.
Joshua, I want to hear your voice.
Hey. No, I'm just listening. I like the points that Brock put forth. The cognitive dissonance topic, I think, when we originally discussed doing this interview, we wanted to kind of tie it into Glenn Beck and kind of the conservative movement. So do you have any thoughts, Cameron, on how you're relating to kind of the theory of cognitive dissonance to Glenn?
Well, I think that he's struggling with that. I think that that's where he's at. I would imagine that if I was a radio personality, or I was on TV and I had been lying either intentionally or just out of ignorance for years, that to come out and say I'm wrong on all these issues at one point in time would be quite a difficult task. So I'm wondering, and I'm hoping, and what, he could be a shill, he could be lying, and maybe this is all for naught, but I'm hoping that this is what's happening. But what people have to realize is that you have to give him a chance. You don't want to have there be a scab or some, where he's like, what, I'm just completely turned off to these assholes. Like, I tried, I'm trying to come along, and whatever. Like I said, it's not about Beck, it's about his audience and the influence he holds. He can bring a lot of people to the Libertarian Party, which he's doing already, which I think is admirable, and there should be credit given where credit is owed. And that's my position. So I think that he probably is dealing with a lot of this stuff. And maybe one day he'll break through, some remaining issues. But think about it. He was a huge advocate for the Patriot Act, and now he's saying, I was a fool to think that people should or could wield this power responsibly. I was wrong. For him to say that, that makes me more apt to hear him out, and that's all I'm saying.
No, you're right. It's certainly a step in the right direction, but just given who he is, I mean, if you or I were to do something like that, we don't have a national audience that we're talking to every day, and it's for an individual like a normal person, it's more credible and believable when I have this type of moment, I guess you could, for lack of a better word to call it. But when a radio host does it, it's kind of like, well, he has other motivations that could be driving this. I'm more skeptical when somebody with such a high profile has this kind of awakening versus like your average guy in the street, because they're yeah.
Can we talk about, though, his show? Because his show, it's unfortunately, I think Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert's shows are probably more educational and informative than what Glenn Beck's show has been. It is not a news show. He brings up topics that are going on and gives his opinion. That's honestly what it is. Okay, and Brock, I'll let you rebut because it seems like you're about to say something.
Well,
but I'm thinking maybe that's what he is doing. He's like, this is how it makes me feel, so I'm going to say it, and I just say things without processing it first.
I totally understand your idea behind that. There's a lot of them that will just say, well, it's just because I feel it, or something like that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Me personally, I believe there's a balance between using your logical part of your brain and then also getting your spirit or emotional, or whatever you want to call that. But I do agree with what you're saying there with Glenn Beck, that when something happens, he'll have an emotional outburst, he'll start crying or do certain things, and it draws in people. But it doesn't make the issue correct. And I will say this:
Right.
I see Alex Jones do it too. I see Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Something happens, and he goes, "Oh, it's a conspiracy of this, 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 and this." Like I remember watching the zombie thing that happened a while back, where the guy was eating this guy's face in Florida, and he says, "Oh, it's a hoax. The government planted this." He's saying in the beginning of his videos. I'm like, you don't have any information yet. Like, calm down. Like, let's analyze the facts about these things, and then we'll discuss it. And so I think I do agree with you there, though, about Glenn Beck. Just he reacts to things too quickly, and he's
Right.
not. So, Josh, what's your take on Glenn Beck in terms of we were just talking about how when something comes in or someone sends us thing saying, Glenn Beck, why don't you do this? For instance, the one that pisses him off every time is when he says, Glenn Beck, why don't you ever talk about 9/11? And he'll just start and I'm not promoting people talk about that, but rather than just using it as an example, rather than him going, well, let's discuss it, he just goes, you guys were crazy, and he brings up emotional things, not factual things, or you bring up Ron Paul before, and he would respond emotionally to the people, and so it's just this spiral. So what do you think? What do you think, Josh, about his reactions to things?
I think you guys nailed it. I mean, he's very emotional in his reactions. Thinking is not one of his strong suits. Let's just be honest, the guy's not very bright. So I would say that he's very good at a few things. He's very good at knowing the pulse of his audience. He's very good at acting. He's very good with his voice. He's very good at a lot of things. He's a very talented guy, but he's no brain, and it's painfully obvious listening to his show, and that's part of the reason I can't listen to it. I mean, the guy's just an idiot.
Yeah, and I honestly I don't even listen to those shows at all. Really, I mean, it's just it either infuriates me, it doesn't put me in as I like to call it, like a high vibration, because I can't get into a good state to accomplish things I want. But the only thing I am saying, and I think I said this before, is just I'm giving Glenn Beck slack because comparing to my friends, and I don't even need to agree with him on everything. I just like that he's talking about some of these issues, like Penn Jillette or whatever his name is. He came on his show, and I agree with everything Penn says, except I think I heard him say one time that he thinks that he believes in a voluntary society except during wartime. And then that's where I went, well, then that doesn't make sense. So, but I don't see anyone going to Penn and sending him hate mail and things like that. So that's where I'm kind of I think the hate towards Glenn Beck needs to be toned down a little bit and used.
Well, same with. Oh, go ahead.
I would say it just needs to be. Find out with the things you like. Let's get with those people and accomplish something, not just find out how many people we can find that are wrong that are not like us.
Right. I mean, and that's. I think. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just ignore them. I don't listen to them. I'll turn them on every, maybe once a year. And the only reason that I even tuned in the last week is because he's being talked about on Facebook, and I'm like, what's this all about? And so after Ron Paul made that tweet about Chris Kyle, and Glenn basically got on air and blasted him. I of course wanted to hear what the controversy was about, but then a week later he gets on and he says, "Oh, I'm a libertarian now. You guys should love me." But it's like 7 days ago you were just blasting Ron Paul, the most popular libertarian in history. I mean, it does not compute. So.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense, and I think that if anyone is looking to say Glenn Beck's going to be the centralized figure for the Libertarian Party, then that's outrageous.
Well, there are those that just seem to be too eager to welcome old Glenn on board, and I think they've got in their eyes, ambition in their eyes. Like, look, we can get Glenn's audience, we can control Beck, we can kind of manipulate Beck and get him to do what we want. I'm like, get real. You guys haven't been paying attention to this clown for the last 7 years. You don't know what he's gonna do.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. And to Brock's point, though, there are a lot of people that we do work with, like Kucinich. Who, as far as I'm concerned, I think he's pretty much a socialist in many aspects, but on war, we agree on war, so let's work together on war. How many people did Ron Paul work with the hemp bills, getting passed and legalizing hemp and what that would do for the marijuana laws and stuff like that? I mean, working with people I think is a fine thing. So I guess that's more so the application that I'm hoping for. It's not puppeteer thing and we're gonna take over his audience or anything like that. But let's have a discussion. If he wants to talk about ending the war on drugs and pulling out all of our military bases around the world, which he says, that's gonna shake up a lot of people, and I like it.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that he does good and promotes the message of liberty, fantastic. I'll cheer for that. But I think that we would be fools not to hold him at arm's length. I mean, we can't go into an election relying on him in order to galvanize support behind one of our candidates, because I guarantee he's going to betray us.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single pundit or politician in the history of the United States that we should ever just go, oh, we can trust him, we don't have to worry about him. I mean, even Ron Paul, like, even though he's never done anything that makes me go, oh, I don't know about him, I still don't. I'm not going to just sit back and go, well, if he's president, I can just ignore everything. I mean, we shouldn't trust any of these people, any pundit. Just realize.
Here's the thing, Brock. Like, there's folks out there that they do let Glenn do their thinking for them, unfortunately, like you talked about earlier. And, these folks just do whatever he tells them to. I mean, if he says vote for Mitt, they vote for Mitt. If he says vote for Chris Christie, they vote for Chris Christie. And so somehow we have to go around a guy like him, because you never know what he's going to do, and build free men out of these people. I mean, that to me was what the Ron Paul Revolution was all about, and that is what I would have liked to seen Rand continued forward. Because once you build free men like Lou Rockwell and Tom Woods and Ron Paul, those type of guys, you don't have to worry about them anymore. Like, they think on their own. It's kind of like teaching a man how to fish; he'll feed himself for life. Once they become a libertarian, there's no going back. They can no longer be fooled by the state and all its mysticism and all its bullshit and its lies and its propaganda campaign. It doesn't work on libertarians anymore. And so that's the type of people we need to be worried about building, because and that's, I think, why the state was so threatened by the Ron Paul Revolution, because that's the type of people that Ron Paul was building. And I think you saw, as time went on, more and more and more people were coming on board, and they needed to do something about it. And then so, last year, during the, when Rand endorsed Romney, that was kind of, in my mind, the moment where that process of building more and more and more free men stopped. And now we're kind of stagnating. And if not, and we might actually be going in reverse, because people, a lot of the young 20-somethings are going from being free men to buying into the cynicism that you have to compromise. And I've seen so many of them buying into this compromise stuff, and it's kind of, just you see them almost month by month making one more concession and one more concession and one more concession, and pretty soon they're going to wake up and not even recognize themselves in the mirror. And I've told some of them this, but they just don't seem to get it. And
you know what, though? Joshua, though, everything that we're talking about, we're fighting against collectivist, mindset and individualism. And so everything that you're doing, all the articles or videos that you're doing, and everything that you're promoting, you're reaching individuals every day, and you're changing, one person at a time. This mindset, or breaking through that dissonance. And so, that may be the case, that you're watching and seeing a lot of this stuff happen, but I would just encourage you and everyone out there that if you reach one person, that's a big deal. If every libertarian out there talked to one person and changed their mind, the movement doubled. I mean, that's a big deal. It's not about getting groups. It's not about getting audiences, even though I think I was even caught up a little bit in, like, Glenn Beck's audience. That's who I care about. But really, it's the individual. If one person is changed, I mean, look at all these MLM, multi-level marketing, well, that one person gets one person, that one person gets another person. I mean, so on and so forth. Think about that. It's big. It can't be stopped, and I don't think that we're going to be going backwards by any means.
Well, I hope that you're right. I kind of fear that you're wrong, but you know, I hope that you're right.
It's true. I mean,
All right.
I think Cameron and Josh brought up some great points. I think the biggest thing is are we headed in the right direction? There's a quote by Jim Rohn, not the guy on ESPN, but Rohn. He passed away about 10 years ago, but he has a quote that says, "You cannot change your life overnight, but you can change your direction." And are we headed in the right direction? And I think we are. I mean, does it mean that there's another group that's heading in more of a collectivist mindset? Yeah. But I also think we need to, if we focus on people realizing just that they're an individual and not a group, just that over and over, and keep pounding that. Once people realize that, they naturally become more liberty-minded. Because if they really, really believe that, then they're not going to be able to be co-opted. Their mind won't be able to be co-opted. I mean, it's like trying to herd cats. I mean, it's like all these little ones. Everybody thinks that they can organize people in the liberty movement, and they can't. And I see that as a good sign. Like, you can't organize us because we are all free thinkers. And the more free thinkers we have, the less the statists can push their agenda on us. And I'm optimistic about it. It doesn't mean the government's not going to collapse. Doesn't mean it's not going to get really hard. But it's just where we come out of it from there.
Joshua, what do you think about the assessment that the functioning and operating principle for liberty and the Libertarian Party is self-ownership? Do you think that that is the fundamental principle, or do you think that there's something else that's deeper?
Well, are you asking like what it means to be a libertarian? Is that what you're getting at?
No, not really. I just, that's what we're pushing is self-ownership. As far as we can deduct, self-ownership is the core principle of liberty. And I just want to see if what you think of our assessment.
Well, you definitely do own yourself. However, I think, the core principle of libertarianism is, you won't aggress against someone else's person or property, kind of the non-aggression axiom. At least that's kind of what Rothbard put forth. Now, obviously, there's competing definitions, but I think that's a good one. That presupposes, though, that you own yourself. So it's kind of more like an ultimate given, you could say. So it's certainly something I would agree with, that you own yourself.
Okay. Well, I don't know if there's anything else that needs to be said. I do want to thank everyone for listening. Please, if you can, share one of our radio broadcasts, articles, or videos a week, either on Facebook or however you connect with people. Please comment. We want your responses. And Joshua Byers, the Pittsburgh Libertarian, he does videos that we try and put on the website as often. But go to his YouTube channel and subscribe there. Joshua, where can they find you on YouTube?
So if you go to youtube.com/Pittsburgh Liberty, you will find my channel. I am going to start a 10-part series on trying to reach conservatives. I'm going to do one video a week on various topics that conservatives have problems with, in adopting libertarianism. The first one needs to be, let's see, I just wrote it down. I think it's what is the state is going to be the first one, and because a lot of people don't understand what the state really is. The conservatives especially are pro-state. They think the Constitution's great, and what I'm going to do is use Rothbard's Anatomy of the State as kind of like the intellectual background to kind of address like maybe a 2-minute message to conservatives to try to get them thinking along the Rothbard mindset and kind of point them towards Rothbard in that article. And as a way to reach out to the conservatives, because if we rely on guys like Glenn Beck, we're in a lot of trouble. So we got to do it. We have to reach the conservatives because nature abhors a vacuum, and if these folks are looking for answers, and they find the wrong guy, someone like Glenn Beck, then we're in a lot of trouble. So I'm going to do what I can to try to give them the right answers, or at least the right answers as far as I can determine them.
Great.
So
well, yes. Go ahead. Oh yeah, no. So subscribe. Pittsburgh Liberty is where you're gonna find him on YouTube, and then of course UnleashIndependence.com will carry that series, and we look forward to seeing that. Always produces great stuff, Joshua. And Brock, thank you. I just want to just say thank you for your time and your input and everything like that. You always seem to bring a very special flavor and great information. So thanks, Brock, on that.
Thanks for putting this together.
All right. Well, Joshua and Brock, you own your life, and so do you, everyone else that's watching.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
UnleashIndependence.com